So I want to go on all those buckets and all those topics and funding, growth, product, sales and marketing, and HR and culture and how to be, how to manage a company. But kind of let's start with funding, and because a company needs money to do anything. You were not a founder of Waze. You joined later as a CEO. Which funding rounds were you involved with?
The B round, the C round, and the acquisition round.
Okay. You're known to I heard you say that entrepreneurs shouldn't take money from Israeli VCs. Is that true?
Okay, we're going straight at it, huh? We're not...
I got a lot of questions, so we're going to have to run through them.
So I'm going to start with a few caveats. These are my personal views. I don't represent Google or anything like that. Second point is my role is to be the extremist. So I will talk in black and white, and the world's actually gray. I know that, but I will be extreme. And C, I already apologize. I'm an equal opportunity blower offer. So I know a lot of people have reached out to me, and I just blow everyone off, so it's not personal. So, Israeli VCs. You're all screwed. That's the reality. You're screwed because you're based in Israel, and the companies that you're trying to sell to, the users you're trying to get to, are in America. Your competitor right now is in the Valley, has raised 3 times as much money than you, has people working in the company who went to school or have worked at Google, Facebook, wherever your acquirers are. You know a lot of great people from 8200 and from the Army and things like that, which is all great, but they have that same network in Silicon Valley. Engineering has become the new investment banking, and so people go into engineering today in America not because they love technology, but because there's a lot of money there, which means there's a whole network now of people that are in engineering roles, et cetera, who are good networkers and are fit and look good and go to Burning Man and do all the cool stuff. And so in many ways, technology doesn't matter anymore, okay? And so this is your problem that you have to deal with. And one of the problems, and this is why I think Icon is such a great sort of organization, is because you don't understand how bad you have it. And once you will move to the Bay, you will, and I've never met someone who said they moved too early. I've met a lot of people that said they moved too late, okay? Once you move there and you spend your first 3-4 months living there, you'll discover that no one is really American, right? Everyone's from other parts of the world, but they all become American after a few months in the Bay, American in the Silicon Valley sense. And even there, you're going to have a challenge that the Israeli network is strong now, but it's much weaker than the Stanford network. So these are all your problems you have to deal with. Ignoring these problems is an option, which a lot of people do. You can live in the myth of, well, we're a high-tech nation, and we went to 8200, and we have better technology than them, and all that. But that doesn't matter. And this goes also to VCs. There's no such thing as an American VC. Very few people in VCs in the Valley were born in America, okay? They've just been working there for a long time. And if you live there for a long time, you will be like them. They sit on the boards of the best startups in the world. Their partners sit on the boards of the best startups in the world. They have worked at these companies. Their network and what they go through every day is a completely different situation than what an Israeli VC does. An Israeli VC, I mean, again, it doesn't matter where the person's from, but a VC that's based here, by the way, same thing with a VC based in Finland, or a VC based in the UK, or a VC based, putting China and India aside, right, in almost any other country, right? The pace that you're seeing is very different, the exposure that you have is different, and the challenges you have is different. And so the same challenge that you have as being Israeli in Israel, your VCs have, because their partners sit on Israeli boards, they sit on Israeli boards, and so all they see is this network. Yes, they go to the Valley every 6 weeks and go to a conference and everything, but life doesn't happen in a conference. It happens in random meetings and board meetings of small companies, etc. And so with this, taking an Israeli VC helps keep you very, very Israeli. On top of that, very few Israeli VCs have actually seen successful exits. So when you negotiate with an Israeli VC, the negotiation is about the downside, right? What happens on a $50 million exit, right? What are the preferences, right? What are the liquidation preferences? When you negotiate with American VC, who's seen exits, okay, they're going to worry about the tax situation at the exit, right? And how are we going to divide up the whatever part of the equity has not been, et cetera, et cetera. And that's a very, very different place to be. You know, in startups, our business is to be optimistic against all odds, right? I mean, statistically, we're all idiots, right? There's no chance we're going to be here. And frankly, if you left engineering school and went to work at Google, Facebook, Amazon, whatever, you will make more money risk-adjusted than the most successful startup, right? So looking at that, considering we're all kinds of idiots and not really rational in what we're doing, your challenge is how do you increase your odds, right? And you want to have people associated with your company that have seen exits. So I'll tell you like my story. So I joined the company, there were 2 Israeli VCs and 1 American VC. And I will not name any of them, because you all know. But one of the great ideas of one of our Israeli VCs was to go from Israel, instead of going to the Bay, to go to Romania. One idea was to go to Singapore, right? That defensive beginning of, well, we're not really good enough, or let's find another country that's small and we can be the big player in it. Versus the American VC, there was every moment that you're not in Silicon Valley, you're wasting your time. If you cannot get an American to buy your product, nobody cares. That's the feedback you need. You need to be pushed on that.
But Noam, what's the practical advice? I mean, of course, I'd rather get money from Andreessen Horowitz than from a fund no one heard of. But what if these are not my options?
Well, this is the challenge. It is much easier to raise money in Israel. And I've been there, so I'm going to talk gvoa, but it's not, the reality, I understand completely what you're going through. You go through fundraising, you never have everything you need, right? And so you start kind of whittling down to what you can get. And that's the problem. Your investor is the only thing you can't change in a company. You can fire a founder. You can fire a CEO. You can do all kinds of things. You cannot change your investor. Okay, so this is the starting direction. The amount of equity you give up in your seed or A round, and today you can argue what is what, is going to impact the performance of the company financially forever, right? These are the most important things. If you cannot interest an American fund, there's a problem with you. There isn't a problem with the fund not understanding. And if you can't interest them, then how are you going to interest your customers to buy your product that are there? How are you going to interest? So you can go the easy way, which is to take the Israeli VC, and it's much easier. But you're already deciding that you're going for a $150 million exit and not for a $5 billion exit. And, it's your decision.
Well, I feel like we could spend an hour just talking about that. But there's
I can give a lot of great examples if you want.
But
without naming any names, of course.
But there's so many topics, and I want to leave time for questions. Let me ask you another question about funding. I'm trying to keep everything very practical. Investment banker, yes, no, and when?
No. And it goes back to the same thing. If you need an investment banker and you can't hustle your own connections, you're in the wrong business.
But isn't it true or false for different rounds, for later round versus early round?
So let's break it into 2 things. An investment banker for raising money means you're fucked, to be frank. It means there's so much money chasing opportunities and so much late-stage money, but it's chasing a very small number of opportunities, okay? The investment banker is not bringing you any real value, okay? They're making your life easier, but they're not bringing value. You have to do the work anyway, right? And if you're looking for the easy way out, go work at Amazon right now. You're wasting your time. But the message you send with an investment banker to the acquirer is that there's something wrong with you. Because your equivalent company did not use the investment round. The Silicon Valley equivalent didn't need it. Okay, so why do you need it? I'll flip it to the exit. I get asked a lot about exits, and I have a lot of experience of N equals 1, right? So putting that caveat aside, by the time you come to sell your company, you need to know all the potential acquirers personally. Transactions in Silicon Valley or anywhere in the world happen personally between people.
Anything happens between, people.
Yeah, well,
Yeah.
Okay. But there's a fundamental problem here that many of you in Israel have not actually worked in these companies, and so you've not actually seen how they look at the world, and so you think it really matters what your product is, what your technology is, that you're better than your competitor, whatever. That doesn't matter. And so when we came to sell the company, I had already met personally with with Ballmer, with Zuckerberg, with Page, etc. I knew all the teams in these companies personally. The people, Brian McClendon, who ran the Geo team, and the Sam, whatever his name is, they used to run the identity at Facebook, whatever. This is what creates the exit. It happens very fast, but it's years in the making.
How did it start? How those relationships started?
So I think most of your relationships start with business. And again, if you're coming to be, the myth in Silicon Valley, companies get bought, they don't get sold, right? Everything starts with business. And business is kind of an old-fashioned word, right? I don't know what the modern term is, right? But you need to be working with these companies. The real decision makers are the product managers and the engineers who are actually running the show there. And these are not special people. They're just like us, right? If you don't have anything that's interesting to them, then believe me, there's nothing interesting to the company. Okay, so you need to be spending the time with them, and it doesn't matter if you actually reach any kind of agreement, right? What matters is you have this connection. Now, when you're in the Bay, this is very easy. When you're sitting in Israel, it's very hard. So yes, if Larry Page calls you up, any one of you will get on a plane and be there tomorrow morning. The problem is that it'll be a very low-level product manager who will be sending you an email asking you something. And you're not going to get up on a plane just to go there because you've got your kid and you're this and you're that and you're other. If you were in the Bay, you'd have lunch with the person. You'd go meet them tomorrow. That's what your competitor is doing. And that's how real networks are built. And when you talk to them, you're going to discover what they do. You're going to discover what the other company's doing. And you're going to learn about what's going on, because everybody talks too much because we're all human, right? And so nothing's really secret. That's your challenge. And once you have that network, it'll seem like everything went fast when actually the time comes. But when the time comes, you need to be able to pick up your phone and call up each person in the other company, and they need to know you and trust you that this is actually happening. And again, that's a challenge you have to solve being in Israel. It's not, it's your problem to solve.
So the practical advice is just go home, pack, and move.
That's one option. You might have another option. But yes, the person who moves to the US has to be a founder. You cannot hire the business development person in the Bay, right? None of you have a real product. I'm not trying to say, what I'm saying is the product is what happens in the meeting. I'll say it again, right? When a founder comes into the room and the customer begins saying, well, I'm looking for this, the founder can already in their head know, okay, we've got this team there, I've got this there, da, da, da. Yeah, of course we have that. It's coming out next quarter, right? Only a founder can do that. No salesperson, business development person, no one who can make those kinds of decisions on the fly. And that's our business, right? Our business is to sell things we don't have and then to catch up quickly, right? So those are the kind of things a founder can do. If you hire someone who's local, that person will be disconnected from the company, will not have any idea what's going on. It takes a long time to be at the point where your product is mature enough to actually hire salespeople, where the sales process is clear, the person you're selling to is clear, that happens way, way, way down your C round, or whatever it is.
So we got a lot of topics to cover. I really feel like I want an hour on each of them, but let's move to product and kind of try to combine them. So I see many startups. One of the questions that I ask the companies that come to SV101 is how many employees do you have and how many are non-technical? And sometimes it's 9 employees and 7 are technical. Sometimes it's so I'm not sure what is the right ratio. So what do you think is the right time? Who should be the first product person for the company? When do you bring outside sales? It's not really product, it's not sales, but...
So I have made a tremendous number of mistakes on product, and on product hiring and in building product teams. Product is one of the hardest roles to hire for because it's the least defined, and it changes obviously per product, per company, per stage, per everything. For the first X years, it has to be a founder. That has to be because all there is in the company is the product. There's nothing else.
But X is equal. X doesn't equal anything. It's about stage.
No, that's what I'm saying. I'm assuming we're all pretty early stage here, right? And so the idea of if you have to the company is the product in the beginning. By the way, that to me is the big difference between a corporation and a startup. In the startup, the whole company is the product. That's it. Your allegiance is to the product. In a corporation, your allegiance is to the corporation. And what is my role? And I'm moving from this product to that product. And what is my career path? So all you should have is product. And that's why it has to be a founder, because the decisions you've got to live the product inside out. The bigger challenge is when you move to the next stage to hire your first PM. That's where things get really complicated. And when you get to the stage where you're hiring PMs that are better than the founder. And yeah, they have to replace the founder. right, as the product leads. Those are extremely difficult phases. I highly recommend reading the book Blitzscaling by Reid Hoffman. There's been a lot written about the 0 to 1 stage of startups, and that's obviously where you're at, so that's really what matters. But the 1 to 100, which is what blitzscaling is about, raises a lot of these questions, which in the micro come there. Every few months, assuming your startup is growing well, every few months you're a different company. And there are different constraints, and you need different people at every one of these stages. And that's the hardest thing in the world, by the way, especially for Israelis, which is to say goodbye to someone who's been 100% loyal and has been a superstar for the first 2 years of the company. And right now, the company needs something else. And this, to me, is the hardest thing you'll ever have to do as a CEO or as a founder of a company, is to say goodbye to those people who did 100% the right thing. They were there for you. They built the company. But the company now needs something else.
Yeah, I'm starting to answer that. What other mistakes did you make on product?
So there's sort of so I'm talking about consumer space and things like that. There's a continuum between the Apple model and the Google model when it comes to product, right? The Apple model is, we know best. Don't confuse us with customers. We're going to go spend 3 years in the dark building something. It's going to come out and be wonderful, right? And then there's the Google on the other side, or Facebook, which is, we're going to come out with something quickly and iterate the hell out of it algorithmically and mathematically and analytically. And through that, we're going to build a great product. Both extremes have pros and cons and make sense for Apple, which done well with it, and Facebook and Google that done well with that. So there isn't a right answer. We started very much on the Apple side, and we could never have built ways by iteration. And I agree that nothing great happens through iteration. At the same time, we didn't make the move to the iterative, data-driven side fast enough. I mean, we made it very, very slow, and we created a tremendous amount of organizational resistance to this. And this was extremely difficult to change. It's a core DNA of the company that needs to start early on. And so that balance is one of your biggest challenges on the product side, is how do you build something that's really unique and interesting by being focused on doing something new, which customers don't have an opinion on? And how and when do you begin bringing in, you have enough customers to listen to? In the beginning, your customers are not your real customers. They're early adopters. They have a completely different set of experiences and usage. So if you build analytically, iterate over those users, you're going to build a phenomenal product, lots of features, that matters to 3% of the population, right? So how do you ignore the customer feedback in the beginning? And then when do you begin listening to it, and which customers? This is kind of the magic. And I failed here miserably. We started very much on the Apple side, and we stayed there way too long. And you'd be surprised how shitty our analytics are and how poorly our sort of analytically driven decision-making was for a very, very long time.
But you think this is relevant also? I mean, I'm guessing most of the people here are doing B2B. I mean, you have millions, or if not more, of potential customers. Can you really iterate when you have a smaller group?
So I haven't built a B2B product, so I'm completely, talking with n equals 0 here. But I think it's the same thing, right? At the end of the day, you have a customer or a user, whatever you want to call them, and all that matters in a company in your stage, and by the way, for the next 10 years roughly, is to make that customer happy, right? And to really understand that customer and solve a real problem for that customer. The question is that customer representative of the market? And early adopters, the same problem B2B, right? You found the first customer that's willing to work with you has other interests why they're working with you. And some of them have to do with the product, some have to do with internal policy, a million other things. And so I think the same challenges are there. Are you building something completely new based on what you think the world should look like? Or are you listening to the customers and building what they want, which is not necessarily something very unique? And you're going to end up going down the path where you end up building an SAP-like product because that's what they know, and so that's what they've been asking for. And this is the magic and the challenge of startups, and this is going to determine your success more than anything, is how do you, who do you listen to, when do you go against the feedback that you're getting from the customer?
But what's the answer? Who do you listen to, and when? And how do you go against the feedback?
If I knew that, I would have sold $10 billion companies. It's magic. It's not. There's a big part of startups that's magical. You can't really explain mathematically. Why does this startup work? The culture aspect, all these kinds of things. This is your challenge there. But I think you have to be very cognizant of the decision. As long as you explicitly express the decision and the stage that you're in, it's going to be easy to evaluate it. When you don't express it and you define it in terms of like more on the religion side, right? This is how we do things, right? This is what our users want. When you start talking those terms, you're basically letting the process drive you. When you say, I'm right now focused on early adopters, and early adopters need innovation, so I'm going to create a product that's very, very innovative, although it may not be right for the mass market at this stage, then you're making an explicit decision that you can check that decision against reality as you go forward. And this is the point. I think blitzscaling talks about it well, that different stages are different decisions, and you have to be explicit to yourself. It's fine to, I'm not going to say lie, but definitely it's fine to cheat the world, right? Because startups is about cheating, right? So how can we cut corners? But don't cheat yourself, right? And when you start cheating yourself and believing what you're telling the world, that's where things go wrong.
I think many times we tell entrepreneurs about their first adopters were Israeli, that you might be solving a problem that exists in the Israeli market, but not in the American market. But you're saying even more than that. Even if your first customer, your early adopters are Americans, they're different. They might be different. They're early adopters.
Completely different, right? Now, it also depends what your business is. I think some of the most fascinating startups have been startups that have taken an existing market and built just basic digital features on top of it. And that's one market that has a very different sort of product approach. There are companies that are building something that never existed before. It's a very, very different approach, right? So, you can copy WhatsApp feature by feature. It's not going to be WhatsApp. The world's a different place. I was asked by someone actually last week, could someone build a Waze today? And you couldn't, because the world's different. When we started, we had to decide, do we build for BlackBerry or do we build for iPhone? Right? And it wasn't clear. The logic said to build for BlackBerry. This is a different world today, right? The customer acquisition costs are different. The maps are different. Like, the whole world is different. So I don't think there's like a formula in that sense.
Okay. Well, again, I feel like we could spend an hour talking about product, but let's move on. So the next topic is sales and marketing. But then when I started thinking about it, I was like, damn it, did they sell anything? And I asked you said we didn't even do marketing. So you didn't sell anything and you didn't market anything. What kind of advice can you give us, Noam?
So what do we have?
Yeah. How did you, yeah.
So we've actually built our marketing org in 2018.
And when did the company start?
2008, sorry. I joined it in 2009.
So 10 years.
Yeah.
You've started marketing.
Yeah.
Don't learn that. Don't copy that.
We probably should have started earlier. We did all kinds of attempts. We wasted a shitload of money. But it's very, very hard to... anyway, I'm not going to talk about sales and marketing. I'll talk about partnerships, which I think is more important. Because we didn't have sales and marketing at this stage. When the whole company is product, right? There's no differentiation between product and sales and marketing. It's all one thing. I think one of the challenges that I see around partnerships is that, and I'm talking about the consumer space, obviously different other spaces, is that there's this feeling that we can find a shortcut to growth. And the shortcut is we're going to partner with a really large player and then all our growth problems are solved. And that never works. It doesn't work because the partner, whoever they are probably going to screw you anyway. That's just the reality, because you're not doing a deal with Facebook. You're doing a deal with a person at Facebook who's going to move to their next role and want to do a deal with you because they're trying to get promoted. It's like the reason people do partnerships with you are completely beyond your understanding, and you will kind of cheat yourself in thinking that's to do with your product or whatever. It has to do with other reasons. Second thing is product. If you can't build a phenomenal product people love and that people tell their friends about, then all the partnerships in the world aren't going to help you. They're going to distract you. And when a large company comes and says, we just need these 3 features, well, they're Amazon. Of course we're going to build these 3 features. That may not be what the users want. There are different interests for the user and for the partner. Once you have strong traction and are growing well, partnerships are an amazing accelerator. But that question of sequencing is very, very important. And what I see happening with lots of Israeli companies, they start consumer, then they discover consumer is really hard, and so they change their platform to be kind of a B2B, SaaS, whatever buzzword we're using these days, kind of solution. And then they've obviously completely changed, they've lowered their risk profile, but they've changed completely the impact they're going to have and the exit value. If they would have kept fighting on the consumer side, maybe they would have failed. But if they would have been successful, right, they probably would not have gone down that path of building the platform or the SaaS thing. So I think the sequencing of when you start partnerships, same thing with marketing. When do you start marketing? All this stuff has to start from the user. Are you really servicing your user by doing the partnership? If not, then you're wasting your time. Everything has to be about the user.
Okay, so no marketing, 10 years.
I don't know, it works for me, but that doesn't mean anything for anyone, of course.
Right.
And by the way, marketing is another one of these terms which means different things in different companies, right? Paid acquisition is a huge industry. In many ways, product used to be marketing. So it doesn't matter. The needs of each company are different. But having a product that people love is the minimum requirement for anything else. Don't waste a minute or a dollar on marketing, on partnerships, on all this kind of stuff if you really don't have product market fit. And we all kind of think we have product market fit early on, but it's what the users are saying. How passionate are the users about your product? Virality is a bad word, but like how much is the word of mouth happening? How much are users complaining? If users don't complain, you've got a problem, right? I mean, they really just don't care, right? And so all those kinds of things are a way to focus, and marketing, partnerships, all that stuff can be completely defocusing and can look like an interesting shortcut, and you end up building the product that your partner wants, not what your user wants.
It's interesting that you said how much the users love the product, because I heard one of the partners from Sequoia speaking, and he spoke about users, how much love, and they actually have KPIs or metrics to measure how much users love your product. It's a thing. It's not.
So product market fit has several ways of measuring it, right? One is the flattening of the retention curves. That's like the mathematical way of measuring it. The other is the intangible that you feel. You feel when it's right. I mean, assuming you're a founder and you're like doing everything in the company, you feel it. You hear it from the users, your own experiences, your neighbor, suddenly, there's like all kinds of things come together and something magical happens. That's a feeling. Don't underestimate the feeling. Don't run away to analytics. That's the easiest thing to do. And when you don't have no users, your analytics don't matter. And when users are all early adopters, it don't matter. Your feeling matters. Now, obviously, there's a point where analytics has to take over. Analytics are very important as part of this and all this stuff, but there's this movement to fear feelings, and you see that's kind of the Google, Facebook approach versus the Apple approach, right? And it's very, very dangerous to replace feeling with analytics. By the way, also the way you build your product, but also the way you evaluate your product, the way you deal with your users. Feelings are really what drive us as humans, much more than analytics. We are not rational players. And so we all fail by believing that if we can rationally build something better for our users. We made this huge mistake on our first carpool product. We built the most efficient, economically efficient product possible. It was terrible. No one used it. People hated it. Okay? We completely missed the fact that this is, and for a company that comes from the consumer sort of community space, it's twice as embarrassing to fall for this. But we fell for the analytical, economic efficiency approach versus the human emotional aspect, which should not be discounted. Obviously, it's not just enough. When we were started out, Foursquare was our nemesis. And both companies started more or less at the same time. And they were the cool kid on the block. Because all the users of Foursquare, people that lived in cities, were like cool kids that went out all at night and were bloggers and this and that and the other. And so they were on the cover of Newsweek and Man of the Year and all this press and all this cool stuff. And we were doing something really, really hard. Of course, our engineers said I could build Foursquare in a weekend, right? Really hard. And nobody cared about us because our users were people that had jobs, lived in the suburbs, drove in. They weren't the cool kids. What we managed to do that Foursquare didn't is move from the cool, fun thing to functionality and everyday usage. And they never made that leap. And that's why we kind of ended up with very different companies. And by the way, they're an amazing company today, but they're a SaaS platform for something else. That move is just as important, but don't discount feelings.
We have two buckets left. We have growth, and we have, the last bucket we called it like HR culture, but I'm changing it to kind of being a manager and being a CEO. Because when I asked some entrepreneurs, what should I ask Noam, it seems like more than 50% of the questions was about how to manage a company and what's the day-to-day like and those kind of things. So I'll ask you one
That's what I would ask also.
So I'll ask you one quick question about growth, and then we kind of dive into all the fluff. So you start a startup, and you're all sitting in the same room, and you communicate with each other by looking at each other and speaking. But then you grow, and you're all over the world. How do you keep, what are some tips and practices on how to manage a company while growing? How to keep the communications while growing? And while you answer, I'm going to grab my sweater because I'm freezing.
As a consumer company, we say growth, I think of something else. Again, I refer you back to Blitzscaling, which I think is the best book about growth. I think the most important thing about growth is to be extremely explicit at what stage are you, and to have a term for it and a word and be able to write it down. So of course, you don't write something that doesn't exist. Writing forces you to decide exactly how you're doing it. If you can write down the stage of your company and what is the number one thing you're trying to achieve at this stage, write it down and everyone in the company agrees that that's the stage and understands what that means. When you do that, you are 90% there. Where we screw up on growth is that we've got all these conflicting things going on, and when you're not successful, then it's easy, okay? When you are successful or seem to be going successful, the problem is you're going to get tremendous amount of inbound ideas. People are going to have ideas. There's like a tremendous amount of stuff happening. Amazing stuff. Oh my God, Amazon want to meet me tomorrow, right? This amazing stuff happened. How you filter it is a function of the clarity of the role, the stage that you're in. So if the first stage you're saying we're trying to achieve product market fit, and you need to be able to ignore everything else and not go to the meeting with Amazon. So what are they asking? Is that helping your users right now? No, don't do it, right? And being able to be that level of clarity is going to drive sort of everything in the company because there's so many distractions. And then you can be at the stage, okay, we think we have product market fit. How do we measure it? Okay, now we want to measure that stage. Okay, now our stage is now we need to raise money. Okay, obviously you always need to raise money, but there's a stage where you have to raise money, right? So what are the actions we're going to do? Like being that explicit in writing is going to be your biggest tool to go forward, and it's going to get harder and harder the more successful you are. The easiest thing is in the beginning. Yeah, we don't have anything, we could do anything. Okay, let's build a product people like. Okay, but when you actually have a product with a certain number of users, it's growing a certain way, and certain geographies are coming in, certain types of users are using it, and you've got all these inbounds, etc. That's where it's easiest to get lost in the noise.
Okay, so let's move to fluff. Fluff. Like, yeah.
Very important.
Yes. And I'll start, I'll try to be controversial. I heard that a good conversation is either useful or controversial, and I think we're trying to be both.
Okay. Now I'm worried about the question.
You're worried about the question. So many startups fail because the founders don't get along. How do you manage conflict within the founding team? What's some best practices to avoid it, and when it happens, how do you manage it?
So the founding team is the essential magical bean that comes into a startup that makes it happen or not. And I think there's a tremendous value for people who've worked together in the past, right, and have that close experience. I think people who have met in like networking to be founders is extremely risky. Okay, the option of replacing a founder with a CEO is never going to happen.
That happened.
I know, I'm the exception.
Okay.
But I'm saying the odds of it happening are zero. Like, and this is, I get asked this a lot because I happen to be the exception. I spoke, when I was doing due diligence on Waze before I joined it, I spoke to many investors that passed on the investment. And most of them said the same thing, right? They passed because they didn't think there was the right CEO material, and they assumed that replacing the CEO was too much risk. And they were absolutely right. Okay, so that founding team needs to be strong enough, have the right mix of skills, right? Have the right mix of hustling and execution, of leadership and, fluff and getting things done, right? And that the culture of the company is the founding team. That's the culture.
But they're already there. These are startups that all raised at least $1 million. They're already they're stuck with the founder. They're not in the state that you're choosing one. And sometimes there's some conflict. How do you solve it? It's not about the choice anymore. It's about what do we do now?
There's no.
How do we avoid it? What would it happen?
We're all humans, and we're all going to have a lot of conflict, and we're going to disagree, especially Israelis. We're going to disagree, and we're all going to be 100% sure that we're right. And assuming that all the founders are smart people, which obviously they are, all our theories will be correct, right? We're not going to have a stupid idea and a great idea. Wow, what should we choose? We have two great ideas, right? And this is where the team, there is a function of a CEO to make the call on this, and you have to make a decision. But that's people. There's no. I don't think there's any kind of simple solution there. But I would say that the odds. a lot of people think that bringing in a CEO is a solution, and I'll tell you, that's not an option. When you go public, you can do that, okay? But until that point, the odds of it happening are zero. By the way, Travis in Uber was also not exactly the founder, right? But he came on early enough that he was the founder. And that's the point, right? There's a lot of things that happen in the first, founding phase, like the first, year from concept to whatever. And then there are people that join a little bit later who are just as much founders as anything else, right? The first employees. When I say the founding team, it doesn't have to be the people that started. It has to be the people that matter in the beginning. And you will see there are people that started out as founders, but ended up leaving after a year or getting to a side role or becoming IC engineers because they weren't really founders. And so that's one thing I think is very important to remember. If someone's not carrying their weight, that's fine. But you need to understand who is the real founding team of the decision making and not to give someone the ability to be a decision maker because they happen to have been there.
I'm going to ask one last question, and I'll let them ask questions. And if they don't have any good ones, I'll come back to mine. It's a dictatorship. So what's your, how do you manage the team? What's your day-to-day like? What's your agenda other than when you're speaking here? How often do you meet with your management team as a group on one-on-ones?
My number one agenda is to try to get away from Yasmin and to fail at it miserably. By the way, I did not want to come, just so it's very clear. But you can't say no to Yasmin. Of course, she comes in from a window, whatever it is. I think that the real role of a CEO is, number one, to make sure there's funding for the company. At the end of the day, we can say whatever we want. If there's no money, the company's going to die, and it's all on you. So don't for a minute forget that or think we're going to bring a banker or there's going to be a shortcut. The second is to set the strategy at each stage. And that goes back to what I said before, explicitly knowing what stage we're in, what is really the most important thing right now to do, being able to verbalize that in a way that people can understand, being able to turn it into tasks that people can understand, right? That is, I would say, the biggest challenge, right, that you have. Third is obviously to hire great talent and to set the culture. Culture is what actually happens. It's not what you say, it's not what you write on the wall. I like to say that when you see, our culture is written on the wall, that's everything they want to be. That's not what they are, right? What you are is what the founding team does. If you say we're about transparency and you don't tell people what's going on in the company or you keep your analytics closed to a small number of people, you're not transparent. Doesn't matter how you say it, right? So the way you act is going to be the culture. And everything you do is being looked at by like a microscope by everyone else in the company. Every little thing. Do you eat first or last? Are you the first one to get the cool swag or the last one to get the cool swag? Everything is setting the culture. And so it's really who you are as a founding team that's going to determine the culture more than how the persona you're going to play. But you have to remember that everything you do matters. The way you deal with expenses, the class you fly in, all these kinds of things are really what's going to determine the culture. But your ability to really make sure that everyone is aligned on the mission right now, that's the number one thing. And then we all get confused. If you're from an engineering background, you want to spend a lot of time as the CEO, but you're going to spend time in design reviews, and you're going to code at night, and you're going to do all kinds of stuff. That's fine. That's a hobby. That's not your profession. And this is where people get mixed up sometimes. People that love partnerships, they want to be on the road all the time and talking to partners and things like that. Again, that's your hobby. Your profession is to make sure there's enough money, make sure everyone is aligned on what we need to do now, right? And to set the culture. That's their real profession.
So what is your day-to-day like?
I start at 11. I go have a breakfast with someone. What's my day-to-day like?
How often do you meet with your entire management team as a group?
So our team meets weekly, actually tonight. I obviously have one-on-ones with my direct reports.
Weekly?
Weekly. Sometimes twice a week. So my product and my engineering leads, I meet twice a week, at the beginning of the week, at the end of the week. Marketing, we meet once, partnership, we meet once, things like that. We're at a little different stage because we actually have now an executive team, and we've got 3 levels of hierarchy, right? You have 2 levels of hierarchy. Founders, engineers, right? That's your org structure right now. I think, what do I do all day? It's actually very interesting. I don't know what I do, yeah.
Do you block times for nothing with no agenda, just to think or strategize?
no. I block time for things I have to do because I'm never going to get there. I'm never going to get to it and my agenda will fill up. Oh, actually, one of the most important things I've done early on that I still do today, and this is something all of you, if there's one thing I will tell you have to take away from this. Every month, you have to send a report to all the employees in the company, all your investors, okay? The same report about the status of the company, what happened that month.
Once a month.
Once a month.
All the employees.
All the employees.
How transparent are you with your employees?
All of our KPIs are open, including revenue, analytics, all whatever we set as the KPIs for the company and the OKRs. We're completely transparent on success and failure. I mean, completely, within reason. But I say this is something I started in the beginning. And I've kept doing it once we got acquired by Google, and it is the best tool I have to keep track of what's going on and to keep people synced. Now, it sounds silly, but you will find it's like a pain in the ass to do, but it will be the most important thing you do. Because sitting once a month and just going through what you've done, you've got to tell a good story, right? Obviously, you're trying to motivate people because it's going to your investors, right? Think about all the good that's happened that month. Your job is to deal with the bad. Your job is to deal with what doesn't work, with the problems. Nobody comes to you to say, everything's working great, we need your help in something. They come to you because nothing's working and we can't get whatever. And so your whole life is dealing with shit. I mean, that's what you do. That's our job as CEOs, right? But that once a month to sit down and look at what is actually good that's worked in the company. What are the progress you've made? It's going to help you focus. It's going to help everyone in the company focus. And for a minute, you're going to have a little bit of nachas. Just a little minute, and then you're going to go back to your shit. But like, there is that window. I tell you, I look at companies I've invested in, and I've stopped doing that. But angel investing is a profession. It's not a hobby. It's for people to burn money they have to burn. It's not to make money. So I've learned that the hard way. But I look at companies that do that versus companies that don't do that, and I see completely different companies, how they progress. And really, that's the essence of transparency, the essence of everything is what you write. Forcing yourself to write forces yourself to think. In your head, everything makes sense. When you actually try to write it down, you discover that it makes completely no sense what you're saying. So I really recommend this. I think if one thing you take away from my talk is do that every month. 6 months from now, if I was wrong, you wasted some time. I don't know what happened. Fundraising never goes well, right? It always goes well for someone else, right? Someone else had a great job, was easy, whatever. I don't know anyone who had an easy round ever, again, except someone else. That's a very tricky situation because there's obviously the trade-off of panicking everyone. What I used to do is just give, let's see, when we were fundraising, I would give very high-level updates when it's happening and high-level feedback. I think the much deeper feedback I would do with the product team or with the engineering team. By the way, fundraising, except for the fact that it's terrible and all that, is actually a very good process of pushing your theories against reality. We all like to say, oh, we're entrepreneurs. Those silly investors, they don't understand anything. The VCs are terrible, right? We love to say those things. They see thousands of companies doing exactly what you're doing at this stage, who burned through X amount of dollars, whatever it is. They have feedback that you cannot get from anywhere else. You need to take it out of them because, they've got a lot of work. So I think Andreessen Horowitz are great at this. And actually, and I remember they did not invest in us, but every time I got an email explaining exactly why they didn't invest in us. And that, I think every investor should do, and I think it's a huge thing. But that was very, very, very valuable to get that kind of feedback. But getting back to the transparency issue, that's obviously a big problem. I did not share how much cash we have. That's one of the things I shared with investors, but not with employees, because it got really close. We closed our B round and we had less than a month of cash in the bank. And our investors couldn't agree on a bridge loan, which is going back to the investor thing. But, so I would not share that. And on top of that, that's also something you got to be careful with sharing even with your executive team. They say the CEO is a lonely job. It is a lonely job. There are many things you cannot discuss with anyone, and especially really bad things. Like the fact you've been at 10 meetings and they all, threw you out halfway through it. That's the kind of thing you should not share. By the way, there's some companies that take transparency as a religion, and I think transparency is a tool, right? You want to be transparent because it's more efficient. The company will run better. It's not that you're going to be, some people are, right? You know, Netflix has a whole culture around being radically transparent, and a lot of people say that doesn't work. The work they tell would never work. So you've got to find the right model for you, but use it as a tool. But I'm just saying, if you say you're transparent, you better be transparent. Like, or define what transparency is. Or just don't say we're transparent. You don't have to be, right? I think it's a very important thing, but a lot of B2B companies, whatever, or cyber company, I don't know what, may not want to be transparent.
More questions?
So I'm Magar, I'm CEO of Lettingo. So what do you think is the probability to get funded by an American VC or investor while your company still stays in Israel?
Very low. And that's part of the issue you need to deal with. It's also very hard to close real customers and to do anything. And I go back to the fact that one of your founders needs to be there. And again, we talk about like things I've seen with companies that I've spoken to. The monthly report is one thing. The other is the founder, a real founder, moving to the Bay early. By the way, New York is a cop-out. It's much easier. I've moved to New York now. 8 months ago, I had enough of living in the Bay, and I'm now in New York. I'm very happy there. It's much easier to work with Israel. And again, if you're in fintech or if you're this, it makes sense. But in the grand scheme of things, if you're in New York, it's easier to work with Israel. You're not really going all the way. Yes, my life sucked. I had to be in the office at 7 in the morning, and I had to go to sleep. But there's something magical about the Bay that can't be explained. There's a pace there. I wouldn't put engineering there. You're not going to be able to hire engineers there. Just not going to happen. So don't waste your time there. You don't need to have a huge team, but someone has to live there. You need to go. Your kids need to go to school with the kids of the CEO of whatever company it is. That's how things happen in the Bay. So I say, without that, very few VCs, American VCs, will invest in an Israeli company that doesn't have. A lot of Israeli entrepreneurs tell them, we're going to move, and then don't move. And so they kind of know that trick already. So just be careful of that. There is a resurgence in interest in Israel. So it's easier now than it was 5 years ago or 10 years ago. But it's definitely very hard. And think about it. The VC has lots of opportunities. Your opportunity to you sounds amazing. He sees 100 opportunities, he's got to choose. The one that sits close with the founder that went to Stanford with them, and they know their brother and this and that, and it's like down the hall, they're going to be able to help them more. They're going to be more involved in what's going on. It's real. Again, we can look at the VCs as a kind of a, because we're Israelis, we know everything, right? We don't need help from anyone. So we can look at it as just like let's play a game to get the money, but they can really help you if you're close. If it has to be getting on a phone at 2 in the morning, they're not going to do it.
Do you think one founder living there is enough, or the entire company should move?
Look, it's a problem. None of you or me are going to be able to go to the Bay and hire the engineering talent you need because you just don't have the network there, right? And you have it here. And that means that already your company is split up, which is a problem because obviously communication is hard enough when you're all sitting in the same room. That's what I'm saying, like, we're all screwed that we're in Israel. There's no logic. I know Israelis that have started their company in the Bay, have hired only Israelis in their company. They have 20, 30 people, and they're all Israelis. But they sit in the Bay. They have a much better chance of success than you do, okay? At the same time, there's reality. Your kids are here, this is where you're going to live, right? So you've got to deal with the reality. But you can't ignore the reality. You can't say, oh, I'm going to hire someone there. I'm going to go every month. That's what I hear a lot from people. I go every month, or I go every other week. You have to live there. You've got to sit in traffic in the morning and listen to the radio. You've got to go to events. Your kids need to go to school with these people, right? My connections to Apple started because my kid went to school with someone whose company was just acquired by Apple when I was there. I mean, that's how the real world works, right? And once you live there for 2-3 months, you're local. So it's a very welcoming environment because people come from all over the world. When I say American, it's not that you're American. You're Indian, Chinese, blah, 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 blah. But because you live there, that's what makes you American.
Well, what we do at Icon is we try to help you be less screwed, I guess.
Of course, and Icon is a great way, but you will see that. If you go to do the Icon program, and you see how many meetings they're going to set up for you in 2 weeks. You see the caliber of people you're going to meet in 2 weeks. This could be your everyday life when you're there. Obviously, this is special because Icon is special and Yasmin is special and all that, but I'm saying, like, that's what happens there. Everybody wants to meet with everybody. Like, that's the culture, there. I like to imagine, the analogy I like to give is, imagine an American Jew sitting in New York trying to do business in Israel. the odds are zero they're going to be successful. They're going to get screwed left and right? Because we all know the reality of what doing business in Israel is with Israelis, right? See, this is the same thing. The fact that you're in high tech and you studied engineering and whatever it is, and you live in Israel and you read TechCrunch, doesn't mean you're going to be successful on the other side of the world, right? And again, by the way, some businesses are not about America. And if your business is not about America, that's a different story. But I'm saying if your business is America and you're not there, okay, you could be successful, but your odds are very low.
Now we ran out of time. I really want to thank you for coming. One more question? Okay, one more question. Go ahead.
This whole concept of moving to Silicon Valley, in an ideal world, you have one of your co-founders move, they're selling like crazy, they're changing their product in their head as the meetings go by, right? In the same day. How do you effectively communicate with that team back in Israel that's actually building?
This is why it has to be a founder. It has to be a founder that has had mileage with the co-founders together, right? It's not a founder that came out of nowhere, right? This is exactly why it has to be a founder. Because if you send the most talented engineer there, and they're going to go back and tell you that we need to change our product like this and this, you'll tell them, you don't understand. That's what the founder will tell them. No, you're wrong. Only a founder will be able to pick up the call, okay, stop everything we're doing, change to this, reprioritize it, and people will listen to them. And that, I think, is one of the top reasons it has to be. I mean, founders are only decision makers at this stage, and that's why they have to be there. Once your product is mature and you have a sales, like, that's a different story. But at the stage that you're in, only a founder can make those kind of decisions and know that they're going to listen to them back home.
Well, we did run out of time. I know against your judgment you came, and I hope you had a good time. We had a good time. It was very useful and a little controversial.
I'll just say the last thing. I've been at a few Icon events when I was on the Bay. This is one of the most transformative things that will happen to you. Everything I say now, and you're like, whatever, what does he know? Go spend these 2 weeks with Icon. You will see the world differently. Thank you, everyone. Good luck.
Thank you.